I just want to say thank you to the CRC and everybody there, but Chris and Van and Ted in particular for the great partnership on this report, which we put out last month, I guess, since we're at the end of this month, in partnership with New Frontier Data, a data analytics firm in the cannabis industry. So I'm going to talk to you about, as Chris said, water usage and some efficiency techniques that we're seeing. I'm going to contrast California data with national data, and I'll explain a little bit of the variation there, but Chris has really got the best handle on specifically what's going on in California and specifically policy recommendations for you all, although I'll happily weigh in. First, I'm just going to tell you quickly about RII because it does underlie some of the reasons and the information in the report. So we've been around for about 5 years. I'm based up in Portland, Oregon. Grew up in Sacramento, actually, in Northern California. And what RII does is, as a nonprofit, is we measure, inform, and verify on various resource usage in the industry. So we establish the KPIs for the industry, help governments and utilities understand benchmarks and baselines, and ultimately inform best practices and policies and whatnot. At the end of the day, we're going to be verifying performance and providing the opportunity for leadership recognition. So we've got a lot of expertise in what we do, and we recently were awarded a USDA grant to essentially do the work that we've been doing in cannabis, but in the larger traditional ag sector, particularly focused in the controlled environment agriculture, which is, we're seeing a lot of field agriculture move into greenhouses and add electricity and just other forms of energy use as one example. And then we also see these urban farms in warehouses growing basil and lettuce and funded with a tremendous amount of capital. And so we're specifically studying those types of resource uses and comparing them to field ag. We interact with a variety of stakeholders throughout the market. Everything we do is peer reviewed and guided by our technical advisory council, which we're proud to have CRC serve on, our water group. And what we do is we engage subject matter experts into various working groups on specific topics. So for this project, we brought together a very representative group of water-related actors. And the whole objective was to everybody on this list and everybody not on this list can agree that we need more data about resource use in cannabis. And the challenge here was that there was really no good data on cannabis water usage. And in fact, there was really just a reliance on some old statistics that for the most part related to the illicit market. And there was some conflation with those numbers being applied to the regulated market. And what we've seen is that the regulated market is generally more efficient with resource use than the illicit market. And so we were out to understand, what does a regulated market look like in all these dynamic ways that it's producing nowadays? And how can we compare that to the illicit market and actually get some good, hopefully representative data? So we used RII's resource benchmarking platform called the Cannabis Powerscore to capture the data. And so this is essentially a web-based survey tool that has analytics underneath it. And it's got hundreds of farms that have provided data to us on the way they're using energy, water, and the waste that they're contributing. We're also doing carbon emissions calculations. And it's also a reporting tool for producers to report to the states that are requiring energy and water reporting and local jurisdictions. So we usually take data from that platform and publish a lot of guidance, best practices guides. So we will be publishing a water recirculation best practices guide funded by USDA for the controlled environment ag sector soon, but that will apply to cannabis as well, or it can be used by the cannabis sector. And next month, we're coming out with a policy primer, which will have in-depth water policy guidance that came out of the work that we did with CRC and others in the water report. We publish other other publications. But I'm here to talk to you about, again, broadly, what are we seeing in cannabis water usage nationally, and how can we compare that to what's happening in California? And then what are we seeing in terms of some efficiency techniques? So we've got a diagram over on the right here that is showing you various sources of water, and then essentially linear and circular flows of water throughout a farm or a facility. And so this is generally trying to represent, no matter the type of cultivation, indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, these are some of the stages of cultivation where water is used. And as you can see, it's used throughout the cultivation process, and there's a lot of variability from farm to farm or facility to facility in how water is used. But generally, it's represented in, you know, the intake, the filtration, the storage, the fertigation, the watering, and then reuse. We're seeing a lot more common, but we also still see a lot of effluent and drainage. So how much water is used, and we've got some statistics here. These are from 3 different data sets that we used for the report. The one primary data set was our national Powerscore database. So you can see there the indoor, outdoor, and greenhouse ranges of, you know, annual volumes of gallons, applied per year. And then with California, you can see that the numbers are smaller. A lot of that is because these are a lot of smaller farms, but they're also in less water intensive environments, greenhouse and outdoor. And then you can also see that in Michigan, where there are larger indoor facilities, that the water use can range even close to 1 million gallons a year. These are just ranges that we saw in the farms and facilities that we evaluated for this report. You can imagine that the ranges are actually larger. You know, there's less water usage in some tiny farms, and there's more water usage in some massive, you know, multi-acre facilities that we see in various parts of the world. So again, takeaway, huge variability in the amount of water that's used. And that variability, or the amount of usage, is really determined by a number of factors. Indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, how they're cultivating, cultivation techniques, if they're reusing, if they're automating, controlling. That gets into some of the technologies that we're seeing that are helpful. Some of the lighting equipment provides a lot of heat in the room and requires or results in a lot of dehumidification and transpiration from the plants and dehumidification, electricity usage as an example. So there's a lot of interactive effects going on, a lot of things that it's really hard to say there's one number that is descriptive of the amount of water that is used in these farms or facilities. So what we want to encourage you all to think about is the way to understand water usage, the way to measure it, and we want to really strongly encourage everybody to move away from a gallons per plant understanding. And that is because there are so many different ways that cultivators grow, from 100, gallon pots in hot climates outdoor to, a sea of green methodology indoors, where they're cramming plants together as tightly as possible to get the value out of the real estate. And so we want to be thinking about gallons per flowering canopy, square footage. We want to be thinking about productivity. How many grams are being produced per gallons applied or consumed? Again, this is more like an industrial process than an office building. You need to be thinking about it as on a unitized basis as well, and then a demand perspective as well. So when you think about, go extrapolate from a farm or facility level and really look at the numbers in the aggregate. In California, while it is a major cannabis cultivation center of the world, as it relates to California agricultural water usage in the aggregate, cannabis is not a major contributor to California water challenges. And so we hope that's a takeaway. This is not to say that there is not a lot of water efficiency that can be done in these farms and facilities. There are. very peer-reviewed, clear takeaway that all the stakeholders who were involved in this said is there is overwatering happening generally at a rate of at least 10%. And so there are a lot of efficiency techniques that can still be applied, a lot of training to support cultivators, and just a lot of best practices still to emerge. With that, I hope that was a useful, just kind of, again, macro overview of the issues around cannabis and water. And I'm really excited to be part of this panel and to turn it over to, I think Elijah is next. And Elijah, thank you for being featured in the report. And Earl, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Chris.